Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Vimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Vimate Bhaktivedanta Ameti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivasesha Dunyavani Paschatanistatharine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Devasesha Dunyavani Paschatanistatharine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Veda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Veda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, oh Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Haribo, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, baby, that's the girl. Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Oh Premanande, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Go, Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa, Parivrajacharya, Ashtota Sakashri, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Brihat Madanga Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Shri Krishna Prasadam Ki Jai. Go Premanandi! Oh, the oven. Hare Krishna, well, I hope you like that cheesecake. It was a cheesecake from New Mayapur. Mahaprasad. Hare Krishna, everybody. Now, Gokularani, Mataji, there is a French translation with Rohini Nandan Das. I don't know how you get there, but if you want the French translation, Rohini Nandan can provide it, but you have to connect with him, Rohini. And Radha Sundari, how is your eye? Is the eye okay? Good? Great, good news. Thank you, I'm glad to hear it. Amiya, Hare Krishna, Ami, Hari Bol, and everybody else, good evening, good morning, good night, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. Great.
Donc, bonjour à tout le monde, bonne soirée, peu importe où vous êtes.
Hare Krishna, I can hear you, Rohini. Hari Bol. So this evening, Hare Krishna, some are on the wheel, driving their cars, some are sitting down, relaxing, all kinds of different positions are here. But as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked him how the transcendentalist walks, how he sits, how he talks, etc. And the basic of Krishna's answer is not what we would normally expect to hear, but it's about being steady in consciousness. How to become steady in our consciousness. In our present pandemic, if that's what it's called, coronavirus, how to remain steady and undisturbed by the various causes of disturbance in this world. This is one of the characteristics of a devotee, isn't it? To be undisturbed even in the midst of all kinds of difficulties. Practice the cultivation. And ultimately undisturbed, meanwhile, for instance, we're on board, if we're in a big ocean and it's very rocky, very wavy, and we just have a little tiny boat, I mean, it's a horrible thought, isn't it? You're in a little tiny rowing boat and the waves are 40 feet high. How would you feel? Scary, huh? But if you're in a massive boat, huge, huge, huge boat, nothing's safe in this world. But you feel a lot safer on that ocean. You feel like you're pretty protected in that massive boat. So that's, of course, a limited example because the material world is limited. But if we take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, they're unlimited. They can protect us from those greatest dangers, the greatest fears, the greatest difficulties, everything. And particularly in this age of Kali, and difficult age, and so many problems, Kaler Doshinade Rajan, full of faults. We take shelter of the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Anywhere we can chant, even if you are in lockdown in some little apartment in Paris or London or New York or wherever you are, Moscow, wherever it is, some small little apartment and we can't go out much. We can take shelter of Krishna. Ultimately, we're stuck, locked up in this body, locked down in this body. We've been stuck in this body for quite a few years. And for the soul, that's locked down, actually. We may not see it. We've got used to it. We're familiar with being in this body. So we take it for normal. But it is not really normal for the soul to be locked up in a little material body with its limitations and its conditionings, and being taken here and there and dragged around by the subtle and gross bodies all over this phenomenal world, trying to find peace, trying to find happiness, trying to find relief, or whatever it may be, searching, toiling fruitlessly, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Maya jala badoye, achomichi kajaloye. Beautiful song. Hey kona chaitanya pe radha madhavanam bolore gai goro madhu sware gai goro madhu sware. What did he recommend? Grihe tako vani tako sadahari boli tako Sukhe dukhe bulonako vadane harinam kodore. Whether you're a grihasta, married person, whether you're a vanaprastha living in the forest, whoever you are, always chant Sada Harinam Bolore, always chant the holy name of Krishna. Whether you're sukha or dukkha, fill the lips with the holy name of Krishna. Maya jalabadahoye, achomichikajaloye, because we're struggling in this material world of birth and death, working hard. But what do we have to show for it? What is the benefit? What is the result? Everyone's the same result, a dead end. Literally, it's like you keep going down a road, isn't it frustrating? You're driving your car and you don't know where, and every road you go down is a dead end. It's just frustrations. But that's the material world. Every road we go down is a dead end. We may be thinking I'm doing well on the way. We're beating everyone else to the end of the dead end, but we're getting there quicker. But that's not the success of life, just to keep going down dead ends. We have to find the real end. What is the real culmination or the real purpose of human form of life? We unfortunately, Ekona Chaitanya Pe Radha Madhavanam Bolore. We've got this human form of life and we're not chanting God's names. We're talking all kinds of things, working in so many ways to try to adjust the world, adjust our bodies, adjust this and adjust that. But we forget the real point of life. It's not about adjusting what we see. It's not even about adjusting the seer. It's about adjusting the means with which we see. But that we continually accept that as the self. We accept the means of seeing as the self, and we forget who we are. We think the body and the mind is me. This is our illusion. But these are the instruments with which we see or perceive the world. It's so obvious, when you really look at it, that I am apart from this mind and body. I'm apart from the sufferings therein, or the effects therein. I'm apart. I'm different from it. I'm superfluous. Anartopashamam shakshat bhakti yoga doshaje. They have nothing really to do with the soul. The miseries of this world are only because we're falsely identifying ourselves with this material body as the self. We've forgotten. We're an illusion, dreaming. It's like when we dream at night, we're forgetting our real nature. So the process of devotional service is to purify our method of perception. Even the method of perception is not the means, let's say, the instruments through which we perceive. There's nothing wrong there. It's the way that we perceive through them. It's like a cup. It's what you put in it that counts. There's nothing wrong with a cup. If you put liquor in there, you get liquor. If you put, water, you get water. It's how we fill our cup, so to speak, and consequently how we perceive the world through the filter of our thoughts, through the filter of our concepts. So that's where we have to work. It's not the object. Generally, we think we have to change the world. Of course, that can be helpful, but only if it helps to change our perception. If it doesn't change our perception, there's no value in changing the world. We just become more an illusion, more entrenched in the material concept of life. So we have to adjust. Maybe some things can be adjusted, which are accepting that which is favorable, as Krishna says, or Rupa Goswami says. We accept that which is favorable and reject that which is unfavorable. So certain situations may be favorable. And we may adjust to try to arrange such things, just like in the home. We try to make our home like a temple. Pictures of Krishna, maybe an altar of Krishna or Lord Chaitanya. Offer our food to Krishna. Keep the house clean. Keep it simple. Don't make it too cluttered. Like this. Music, maybe bhajans playing of Krishna Katha, hearing about Krishna. Like this, we try to make our environment more favorable. But in general, what can we do about the world around us? It's the world within us that we have to really focus on. And only the world around us, maybe hopefully helps us to remember our inner, just like with the pandemic right now. It can be actually a very favorable thing for devotional service. It can help remind us of how fallible we are and how dangerous this world is and how important it is to chant Krishna's name. And if we really want to help other people, then we have to help ourselves. If we're not healthy, how can we help others to become healthy? To take this pandemic, maybe I can read, I don't know, let's see. Oh yeah, I'll read something from Prabhupada. Prabhupada writes, just like if there is epidemic disease, and if you take the vaccine, it is supposed that you are free from the contamination. Now, they're hoping to bring in some vaccine very shortly, I've heard. So this vaccine of chanting Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada calls this a vaccine. This vaccine of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra will keep you fit without any contamination of Kali Yuga. And that is happening all over the world. People are chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Excuse me a minute. I'm on the bottle. That is our only request. Then, in spite of this contaminated age of Kali, you will be saved. You will be saved. That is our Krishna conscious movement. It means we are preaching this cult. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Keva, Kalo Nasti Eva, Gatiranyata. Without this chanting, there is no other way of saving you from the contamination of Kali. So here is another question. It's this. the Dharma Uvacha, personified religion. He is inquiring from the cow. He is addressing the cow. Amba. Amba means mother. Cow is our mother. Why mother? Because from practical point of view, we drink milk. So how mother? How cow is not mother? She is mother. We are tasting her milk. There are 7 mothers according to the Vedic civilization. Okay, I'm not going to read this going long article about the cows, which is very important also. This is another major anomaly in this age, is that people are not understanding the importance of cow protection. We talk about it, but we don't practically apply enough. Some devotees are, and some people are, but we don't apply it nearly enough. It's such an important program, protecting the cows, and of course chanting Hare Krishna as well. Protecting the cows in it itself is an incredibly pious activity, and when accompanied with the chanting of Hare Krishna, it's an ideal combination. So I'm going to a little read something maybe from, what's this? Just give me a second. Can I turn this off? About chanting. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 641. Bhakti sadhana shreshta shunite hailaman prabhu upadesha kaila nama sankirtan. Even for a gross person like myself who has no culture, the Bengali is so sweet. It's poetic. It's all, every word, like in the spiritual world, every word is a song, every step is a gait or dance. And it's all poetic. Sanskrit, Bengali, very poetic languages, flowing, very pleasing. Very pleasing to the soul, very satisfying to the soul, just simply to hear the verses, what to speak if they're pronounced properly. Even if improperly pronounced, it's still very purifying. So this is a verse where Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is asking Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he's asking him, which item is most important in the execution of devotional service? The Lord replied that the most important item was the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The most important item of all devotional activities is chanting. Now, this chanting should be going on regularly. Even we may be doing other activity. Lord Chaitanya, all the acharyas recommend that we chant, accompany the service or the activity with chanting. As much as possible, this chanting should go on. Wherever we are, whatever we are. Yes, either we're lazy or we're covered with other thoughts. We are not thinking like that. Or we're lazy, something. But we need reminding that this chanting is the essence of devotional service. Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj said it is both the sadhana and the sadhya. It is not a means to end it, it is also the end or the goal of our sadhana, of our practice, is pure chanting of the holy name. Because the holy name possesses all transcendental qualities. All the potencies of the Lord we sing in the Shikshastakram prayers. Na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam vajagarishakamai mama janmani share bhavatad bhakti rahitiki. That wasn't the verse I meant to chant. There was another nice verse anyway. What's the second verse of Shikshastakam? How does it go? Second verse. Nam namakari bahoda nija sarva shaktis tatrapita niyamatachmadanena kava etadishi tava kripa bhagavan mamapi dudaiva medrisham mihajani nanuraga. Lord, in your holy name, you've invested all your transcendental potencies Everything is there in the holy name. Everything is there. It's so easy to approach Krishna through chanting the holy names. So easy. But unfortunately, we have no taste for what we chant because we're still offensive. We have other goals. We don't have that one-pointedness. Comes by practice. Even in England, we say practice makes perfect. You have to practice. It takes time. We have to make that endeavor. Ultimately, we depend upon Krishna. We have to make our endeavor to try to hear the sound of Krishna. If you do not hear me, Krishna says, you'll be lost. Hearing the sound of Krishna. Whether we're chanting japa or kirtan or whatever we're chanting. But to try to hear that sound vibration means we're paying attention to Krishna. Paying attention to Krishna. We're very attentive to things related to ourselves, maybe, or our family members. Different activities which we may get some sense gratification out of. We're very keen to hear about. We may be very keen to hear about other people sometimes, or about the news of the world. But if we could just become keen to hear Krishna, even if it's not the pastimes, just hear the sound. By hearing the sound, Krishna, Bhaktivinoda describes how the form of Krishna is revealed by attentive hearing. Krishna reveals his form, the all-attractive form, and then the qualities and pastimes of the Lord, one by one, become manifested in the purified heart. As the heart becomes cleansed, Krishna reveals himself in the heart as they surrender. This is surrender. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yeyata mam prapadyate, tamstataiva bhajamyaham. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Surrender unto Krishna means, in this case, it means simply hearing the sound of Krishna's name. It's surrender. We're giving up all other thoughts and other endeavors to solely try to hear the sound of Krishna's name. Surrender. Then Krishna rewards us accordingly by cleansing our means of perception. Cleanses the heart of all the dirt accumulated for lifetimes. Our means of perception is cloudy, just like a covered mirror or fire covered by smoke. The actual substance is not clear. It's all cloudy or misty or dusty. We're covered over in this material world. The idea is to release ourselves from that covering. We can't release ourselves. How can a man tied up with ropes release himself? We need help. Therefore, Krishna comes in the form of Nama Prabhu, as the holy name, in the form of his devotees. They come and help to try to release us. No, I don't want to let go. Leave me alone. Why are you bothering me? And the man who's tied up may not want to get untied. He's just so, let's say, his comfort zone in this miserable situation probably gives examples sometimes of a worm in stool. You take the worm out, it runs back to the stool quickly. It's attached to this stool-like existence. So to get out is very not easy. Preaching is not always so easy to change. But at least we can try to work on our own situation, whatever bondage we're in, to try to clear our hearts of all these misconceptions, these various false identities and so on, by trying to hear the sound of the holy name, Krishna. Lord Chaitanya said, Prabhu kahi shastre kahi shavana kirtan, Krishna prem seva palera paramasadan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, according to the verdict of the Shastras, the process of hearing and chanting is the best means to attain loving service to Krishna. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu gives the following information about devotional service or sadhana bhakti. Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sasadhana vidha nitya siddhasya bhavasya prakacham hiri sadhyata. The process of devotional service, beginning with chanting and hearing, is called sadhana bhakti. This includes the regulated principles that are intended to awaken one to devotional service, to wake us up. Jeev Jago, Gora Chandra Bole, Kota Nidra Jai Maya, Pisha Chira Kole, Pajibo Balia Ese, Samsara Bitare, Ulia Rohile Tumi, Avidyara Bode. Beautiful song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Wake up, Jesus. Wake up, sleeping souls. And if you're in New Zealand, you might be waking up right now. Wake up, sleeping souls. You're sleeping in the lap of the witch called Maya. Why Maya is not a witch in one sense, but she acts like a witch to bewilder our perception, bewilder our consciousness. Through consciousness we perceive, bewildering us in this way, covering our vision of reality. It's our business because it's our choice. Krishna has placed us in this world because of our choice. The material world, Prabhupada says, only exists because of the desire of the living entity. Krishna is reciprocating with the living entity's desires. And to awaken a desire for Krishna consciousness is an incredible, let's say, challenge because we're so conditioned in material consciousness. Take strong or attentive chanting of the holy name and a lot of mercy from the Lord and the devotees. Purifying. It's like if you have a very strong fire, it takes more than just a fire engine to extinguish. It takes a rain cloud. Spiritual master is likened to a rain cloud, extinguishing. Kang Sharadava Nalalita Loka Tranaya Karana Ganagana Prabtasya Kalina Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Radhanaravind. He's offering, it's just like a rain cloud, to extinguish a forest fire. So similarly, the spiritual master extinguishes this blazing fire of material existence by giving instructions, actually, chanting the holy names and giving us instructions in sadhana bhakti, which will extinguish. Maybe fires don't go out immediately, but if the forest city, a rain cloud continually pours down, just like the Goswamis, they're pouring down their mercy on this world through transcendental sound vibrations to extinguish the blazing fire of material existence. No amount of mundane efforts, charity, welfare work, education, feeding people, all goes on in this world, but it does not extinguish the blazing fire. It just makes it tolerable. It just makes it so that we can survive, maintain ourselves in this blazing forest fire. But to extinguish the fire is not just an external endeavor. It is an internal one, to change our consciousness so that our very tendency to act in such a way as to cause a blazing material fire of material desires and karmic reactions and so on will be extinguished by creating or awakening within our hearts our remembrance of Krishna, at least keeping us engaged in such a way there's no more karmic reactions. And that's more favorable situation. To practice sadhana bhakti, to practice devotional service to the Lord. Prabhupada goes on. Devotional service is always dormant. He says, always there in everyone's heart. It may not be manifested, or it's perverted towards service to the material world. And by the offenseless chanting of the holy names of the Lord, one's original dormant Krishna consciousness is awakened by offenseless chanting. It sounds easy. We all know it's not as easy as it sounds. At least from our perspective, it seems like that. Prabhupada said you can become Krishna conscious in a moment, but usually it doesn't happen in the moment because we have still a lot of coverings in our heart. We're not willing to let go certain attachments, certain mentalities, etc. Krishna very kindly is helping. Sometimes he places us into situations whereby, we get frustrated because we don't get materially what we want. We may even start blaming Krishna. There's actually Krishna trying to call us to turn towards him instead of towards our, whatever, our good karma or our talents in this world for results, etc. And we don't get the result and we become frustrated. That's Krishna's mercy, generally speaking. And it's an opportunity for us to turn towards him. Just like now, where there's a pandemic, we may not be able to go out on the street chanting and dancing and just doing books. There's an opportunity to take shelter of Krishna and really take places, because ultimately that's what it's all for. Krishna wants us to go back to Godhead, not stay here. The whole purpose of this material human body, and specifically of ISKCON, any spiritual organization, is not just the organization. The organization is as valuable as the fruits that it bears. And the fruits are not a material, numerical number. The fruits are the awakening in the heart of the living entities of their remembrance of Krishna. The living entities are waking up and starting to remember their relationship with Krishna and then evolving further and further to the point where they have no more material contamination. And then they become steady in their devotional service, fixed, firm faith, and then gradually getting a genuine taste. Because nishta, when one comes to the stage of firm, steady devotional service, that means we're beyond anartha, which means we're beyond offensive chanting of the holy name. And that's when real devotional service begins. In one sense, devotional service at any stage is devotional service. But spiritual devotional service really starts to evolve at that nishta stage. To then is practice, and a little bit of mercy from Krishna, we get taste. There's a taste in the service, there's a taste by the mercy of Krishna, which spurs us on, the association of devotees, the taste we get from service, maybe a little competitive edge. Different things may spur us on. Certain things we like about devotional service. When one comes to the steady or nishta stage, there's no question of offenses, really. One's passed over anartha. And there'll be stages of nishta, in bhajana kriya, nishta sadhana bhakti. May also be at the stage of bhajana kriya, when the bhajana kriya becomes steady, nishtita, becomes very steady practice of devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master. And that's the mercy. He gives us certain principles, certain practices which are specific to help us to steady ourselves so we're not wandering all over the universe, getting diverted away from Krishna. Gauges as sadhana, which is meant to be, effectively speaking, to help us to focus everything we do on Krishna, whether it's chanting or daily worship, Srimad Bhagavatam class, Tulsi Puja, whatever it may be, to help us receive mercy also, but to help us to literally focus our consciousness on Krishna. And thus, when the consciousness is connected to Krishna somehow or another, then Krishna purifies our consciousness by association. We sit in front of a picture of Krishna, to the degree that we're conscious of that picture, our consciousness will be purified by the presence of Krishna in that form of the picture. It forms an impression, not only cleanses our heart, but forms an impression in our heart, which comes up. It's always there. But to speak of deity worship and chanting the holy names and devotional service in general, they all form different samskaras and or impressions in our consciousness, which help to remind us of Krishna, to expose ourselves to circumstances which help to remind us of Krishna. So that choice we have to a certain extent to work on trying to facilitate this purification of our consciousnesses. As Krishna, who purifies his pavitram, he purifies our consciousness. So our vision, our perception becomes clearer, not so much based upon the effects of our false ego in the form of all kinds of self-centered concepts and desires and so on and so forth. Colored, our consciousness is kalatmika, it's colored by various degrees of the modes of nature. And one person sees, as they say, about the Bible, we both read the Bible day and night, whereas you read black and I read white. We see opposites, even though we're reading the same thing. We see it in an opposite way. Even when Krishna entered into the arena of the Dana Yagya of Kamsa, the wrestling arena, everyone there, many groups at least, saw Krishna differently. Some people saw him as a mystic yogi. Some people saw him as a super soul. Some people saw him as the darling of their life. Some people saw him as an ordinary boy. Some people saw him as death personified. Some person saw him as a proud young Vaishya. Some people thought he was their enemy. All kinds of different ways people saw him as he entered into the Dana Yagya. It's not that Krishna was any different. It's just that their means of perceiving him based upon their karma, of course, karma, all involved, but their consciousness is different, so they see him differently. They see him differently. According to how we identify with this world, we judge things differently. We have likes and dislikes. The object's the same. One person likes, one doesn't like, because we have a different means, a different set of senses, a different body, a different mind. It's all the same. Say not the same in terms of, let's say we're all the same, but we have the same qualities, same nature. But because we have different bodies and minds, different means of perception, we see same thing very, very differently. Well, not that has to necessarily change, but it has to become purified. It has to become purified. Purification of consciousness means to see things in relationship with Krishna. And that's why sadhana bhakti is so important. It's the process of renovating or readjusting our consciousness to begin to see things in relation. First of all, to get it under regulated control, and then at the same time chanting Hare Krishna, etc., to start to see things in relationship with Krishna, that which is favorable. And the more we see Krishna in the center of our lives, the less we'll be affected by the material energy, because if we're seeing everything with me in the center, then everything affects me. We get disturbed by so many things. Art, devotional service, spiritual life, to see Krishna in the center. Baba goes on, the awakening of Krishna consciousness is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. This can be divided into many parts, including faith, association with devotees, initiation by the spiritual master, engagement in devotional service under the instructions of the spiritual master, steadiness in devotional service, and the awakening of a taste for devotional service. The sadhana bhakti is steadying ourselves in our practices, and then gradually, by steady devotional service, the anarthas are removed, and one actually comes to the steady state of nishta, means steady, when it's fixed and steady. When a devotional service is undisturbed, uninterrupted, then ruchi, one gets a taste, a genuine taste, not just a conditional taste based upon results or how I feel or whatever, but a much deeper taste in relationship to, more and more actually, in relationship with Krishna himself. One's attachments to Krishna become very strong, very strong. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us an authorized program for attaining perfection, centered around the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. This chanting has so much power that it immediately attaches one to Krishna. That is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. Somehow or another, one has to fix his mind on Krishna. Very simple. There are certain prescribed methods of employing the senses and mind in such a way that our dormant consciousness for loving Krishna will be invoked. As much as a child with a little practice can begin to walk, one who has no basic walking capacity cannot walk by practice. No matter how much practice, the child has no capacity, he will not walk. But the living entity has a capacity to love Krishna. We may be resisting it. We may be whatever. But the capacity is there to love Krishna. Right now, reflected into this material world pervertedly in loving other living entities in this world separate from Krishna. Loving ourselves, loving our family. These things go on. Not that they're not going to go on, they will go on. But the essence is to see them in relation with Krishna. Because we love Krishna, we'll love everyone. We can't possibly love everyone separate from Krishna. It's not possible. There's so many different states, let's say, scenarios, situations in this world. So many. We only meet a few people in this lifetime. But by loving Krishna, as I say, watering the root of the tree, the whole tree benefits. So this process of awakening our love for Krishna is called sadhana bhakti. Similarly, Krishna consciousness cannot be aroused simply by practice. Actually, there is no such practice. When we wish to develop our innate capacity for devotional service, there are certain processes which, by our accepting and executing them, will cause that dormant capacity to be invoked. Such practice is called sadhana bhakti. So there's contradiction there. There is no such practice. What it means is that it's already there. Practice, one gets something, but the love of God is there. So there are certain practices which, when performed, can evoke what is already there, awaken our dormant love for Krishna. In of themselves, they can't necessarily do that either, but because Krishna is in the heart, and he's pleased when we follow the bona fide, authorized form of sadhana bhakti, and he reciprocates accordingly. So many verses of it. Okay. Now we're going to open up for questions. Where are we now? Let's get back on the page. Where are we gone? We've lost it. There we are. Back we go. So we're opening up for questions. If anyone would like to ask any questions, please type them in or speak them through Rohini Nanda Prabhu. Okay, that's just about Gokularani. So any questions, Rohini? What's that mean? Come on, somebody out there, ask a question.
No, we don't have question here in Skype.
Good time to start questioning. Questions and answers. This is the whole process of spiritual life based on questions and answers. Or if you have some answers, you can give some answers. So what is it tomorrow? Special day tomorrow? Whose disappearance day? That's a question, the easy one. Disappearance day tomorrow? Gorkishore. Tomorrow is the disappearance day of Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Ki Jai. Don't forget that. Great. Is it Ekadashi tomorrow or the day after? Some places tomorrow, sometimes. Some places the day after. But Ekadashi is coming up. The last few days of Kartik. Some devotees are following what's called Bhishma Panchaka. But generally speaking, this was not something that Prabhupada indulged in at all and didn't really mention at all. It's kind of something which is entered into the practices of certain members of our movement. Nothing wrong in a sense, I suppose, as long as it doesn't whatever the time is be. It shouldn't be that it reduces our devotional practices, not unless we're asked to do it like that. We shouldn't say, oh, Prabhu, I've decided today to chant 64 rounds. I haven't got time for any service. Devotional advancement doesn't work like that. It's not a matter what we choose. It's a matter what Krishna chooses. He's the one who makes the decision. And he's the one who gives real devotional service is not a mechanical process. It's a revelation within the heart. As they surrender to me, I reveal myself accordingly, it could be said, not just reward accordingly, but Krishna reveals himself also as one surrenders. So surrender isn't just a numerical achievement, some austerities that we like to perform because for whatever reason we may like to do. But that's not how we become Krishna conscious. when we become surrendered servants of the servant. So that's the line to which Krishna gives revelation. He reveals everything in the heart by simple, pure-hearted endeavor in devotional service, working under the guidance of the spiritual master or senior Vaishnavas or authority, whatever it may be. And then Krishna is pleased. It's he who gives the revelation, not the process itself. That may be useful in evoking the dormant love of Godhead in the heart, but it doesn't cause it, it's already there. And it's Krishna's grace alone that is awoken within our heart. So we have, what is a good question? Somebody's asking here. That's a very good question. Thank you for that question. What is a good question? Well, at different levels of our maturity, what is a good question for a baby? What is a good question for a child? Good question for an adult, a youth, a good question for an adult, a good question for an old man. They may all be different in the nature of but ultimately they should all be questions aimed, as Krishna, as in Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami says. What do you say? Is that nice verse? Slipped my mind right now. But your questions are worthy. Munya Sado Prishtaham Bhavadbiya Lokamangalam Yatkvita Krishna Sampan Prashno Yenatma Supasiddhati. Sutta Goswami, replying to the great sages of Naimishrana, says, your questions are worthy because they relate to the personality of Godhead and thus are a benefit to the whole world. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. So the questions should all be geared. Of course, we have our occupational work in life, that's different. Or you have family responsibilities. Questions have to be, obviously, are there within the scope of these particular part of our lives. But in terms of spiritual questions, they should be aimed at how to ultimately become Krishna conscious. If you read in the first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the sages are asking quite a few questions. They're all aimed at the welfare of others as well as themselves and how to achieve the goal of life. They want to know how to achieve that goal, especially in this age of Kali. So questions which will help to improve our devotional practices, cleanse our hearts, awaken help us to become more fixed in our devotional service. Questions which help us to be more absorbed in sadhana bhakti or devotional service of the Lord. Then there may be questions which are related to spreading Krishna consciousness also. Both have to be there. Internal purification, also questions related to service. Now, these questions at this stage of sadhana bhakti are very relevant. On more elevated platforms, the questions may take different forms. In the very beginning, the questions may be very simple. They're good, but that's a baby stage. So we shouldn't still be asking questions. Why should I be getting up for Mangal Arati? Why should I chant 16 rounds? These are baby questions. I was hearing some time ago in Prabhupada. One time, one devotee was asking Prabhupada, now this is on another level, maybe we're not on this level, but devotee asked Prabhupada, should we teach the Harinam Chintamani? Prabhupada said, you haven't got past that stage yet. This is based on, offenseless chanting, only expecting the devotees to be chanting offenselessly. So if we're not chanting offenselessly, then maybe questions should be asked, what are we doing? And how can we become offenseless in their chanting? But those who are already chanting offenselessly, which we're not, we shouldn't start getting proud about it either. But at the same time, then the questions maybe. But the questions are how to advance in spiritual life. When Prabhupada asked the question, he said this is the only real question that we should ask. And his question to his spiritual master was, how can I serve you? He asked this several times. How can I serve you? He said, In one letter, Prabhupada said, this is the only absolute real question we need to ask. We ask so many questions, but ultimately, how can I serve you? Because service means, how can I please you? What do you want? How can I give you what you want? Not what I want, what you want. This is service. So ultimately, it's the same thing in a different way of saying, how can we advance in Krishna consciousness? Good question. Hare Krishna, does going to Golok Vrindavan come under the 4 kinds of Vaishnava liberation? Not necessarily, although it can come under, for instance, it can do, attaining the same planet as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But that usually refers to the Aishvarya stage, Vaikuntha stage. This pure devotee of the Lord simply wants to serve Krishna. It's just completely in love with Krishna. Doesn't have any other thought other than whatever you want, Krishna. But yes, the devotee doesn't even aspire for that necessarily. He just aspires how I can please Krishna. How I can please Krishna. What does Krishna want? And automatically, Krishna wants such devotees to be in Goloka Vrindavan. You don't have to, I want to go to Goloka Vrindavan. It sounds really cool up there. Wow. That's kind of nice sentiment, but it's not quite like that. There's no tinge of any selfish interest whatsoever. Goloka Vrindavan, it's completely, the heart is 100% for the pleasure of Krishna. In hand. But as one becomes purified, more and more purified in consciousness, then one realizes actually that my eternal constitutional position is simply to please Krishna, whatever role it may be. It's not like it has to be necessarily here or there. But the body does aspire to want the mood of Goloka Vrindavan, which is the mood, that mood of Goloka Vrindavan. I hope everyone there only exists for the pleasure of Krishna. Everything, not just everyone, exists for the pleasure of Krishna. This is devotional service, that which is pleasing to Krishna, Krishnendriya. But generally, when we hear about the 4 Vaishnava liberation, Sharshi, Samipya, Salokya, and what's the other one? Samipya. So when we usually hear about these types of liberation, it usually refers to those who are aspiring for the Vaikunthas, have the same form as the Lord, same opulences as the Lord, same planet as the Lord, like that. Usually refers to that Vaikuntha stage. But it didn't have to be. I mean, to desire to be on Goloka Vrindavan means we have to develop the mood. It's not just a question of the center. It's an automatic thing when the mood develops. That mood, which is the mood of Goloka Vrindavan. So that comes by association. Therefore, the Lord appears in this world to perform pastimes in Gokul Vrindavan. And his devotees, his followers, those who are like, Lord Srila Prabhupada, everywhere he goes, creates the mood of Vrindavan, the mood of Golok Vrindavan, giving us an opportunity to associate. Because when Krishna comes, those who are entering into Golok Vrindavan said that if they're eligible, they go to the place where Krishna is performing his pastimes. The pure devotees, they create that Vrindavan environment, that Vrindavan atmosphere wherever they go. So the idea is that the jiva, conditioned soul, gets that opportunity to associate with the representative of Krishna, the pure devotee, who is nothing but, you could say, personification of loving devotional service. And within his heart, he carries Vrindavan. Everything about him is in the mood of Vrindavan. So we try to associate with them. Then we can also awaken this pure mood, this mood of pleasing Krishna. Hare Krishna. Anything else? Does Krishna, here's another one, can Krishna appear as anyone to the devotee? Well, yeah, Krishna can do anything he likes, but we have to be careful from our point of view. Krishna is everywhere, therefore everywhere is Krishna. Krishna can appear anywhere, therefore anyone is Krishna. Well, it's a matter of be careful. There's a very nice song also. Krishna Pita Krishna Mata Krishna Dhanapran. That Krishna is my mother, Krishna is my father, Krishna is my life and soul. So if Krishna is my mother, that makes my mother Krishna, right? My father is Krishna also. Some people think like that. Well, Krishna's in their heart. He's in the heart of everyone. And every living entity is certainly an expansion, you could say, a specific expansion of Krishna. It's not a direct, we're a Vaish. We're empowered, you could say, by the Lord. One type of expansion, but it's not the samsa, it's not the internal or the full expansion of Krishna. But it's a jiva tattva expansions, are also expansions of Krishna, but they act in a different role. They're the worship of God. Krishna is the worshipped God. So we have to know our role. So we can learn. Another way of seeing this question would be to see every living entity being guided by the Supreme Lord, and we can learn somehow or another. We can understand that nothing is happening by chance. Krishna's hand is working through everyone. Whether we know it or not, Krishna's hand is acting. So we can learn from various situations in this world. In this way, we can see Krishna working through others. But we have to be a little bit careful. And if we are generally these type of situations, this type of assumptions or questions, or I'm sure that this is Krishna in this speaking to, we do have to sometimes be a little careful. Sometimes we have to justify it or qualify it by discussing with more senior devotees, and be willing to accept, not just trying to impose our beliefs upon others, but willing to accept we may not always be correct. Certainly Krishna is present in every living entity. We have to be careful we don't just follow someone because they say or we think that this is Krishna. It has to be qualified by Shastra, Guru, Sadhu, as well as by their behavior, etc. We have to be a little careful. But Krishna can do anything else. He can if he wants to. He can if he wants to. It's just like we see in our own acharyas, even to Maharaj, Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj's Tirabhasa. One time, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, he had one disciple, and this disciple, young man, he left his body very, very early. I think he was just 15 or 16 years old. At some very young age, he left his body. He only been a boy, but he was Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj. It took him under his wing, basically speaking. Boy had something special. When he died, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj went to his funeral ceremony, whatever. He went for the program there in the village of this boy. And then he said there and then, my spiritual master appeared before me in the form of this boy, but I did not recognize him. So Krishna can do anything. The pure devotees can do anything. We can't, but we can't always tell. So we've got to be very careful. We know for sure that the spiritual master's instructions are there. We know we try to apply those as our rod of let's say, of discrimination and association of devotees, to understand how to apply those instructions and how to qualify any situation which may be questionable. We try to inquire from senior devotees and pray. We can pray to the Lord for guidance also. How to cultivate compassion. How to cultivate well, we've got part of it already, passion. We certainly have plenty of passion. So now we just need calm. We've got wind calm. No, you don't probably have wind calm. How to get the calm? How to get the compassion? The compassion, Radharani, is the personification of Krishna's compassion. So the whole process of the devotional service is based upon the grace of Radharani. So the practice of devotional service itself is a compassionate process. Compassion is a characteristic of the soul by nature. It's a purified soul by nature is compassionate. What we have to understand, what is real compassion? Perverted, reflected into this world as the mundane compassion, so to speak, is not real compassion at all. It's reflection of compassion. As a reflection is related, but it's not real. Feeding people, feeling sorry for people who are suffering. It's not to say a pure devotee doesn't have that also, but it's based on the spiritual platform, not the material one. The living entity suffering in this material world is due to their forgetfulness of Krishna. So real compassion is to awaken remembrance of Krishna and others. So again, the process of devotional service, as we heard earlier on, is fundamentally a process to awaken our remembrance of Krishna. That's what it's for. We read that earlier. And to remind others of their relationship with Krishna. So that's genuine compassion. The practice of devotional service, which is intended to evoke our relationship with Krishna, our remembrance of Krishna, is also understood to be a process of purification. And as the soul becomes purified, then the natural qualities of the soul should start to manifest. And amongst them, compassion, magnanimity, mercy, equal to all different similar qualities are mentioned there, which should be evolving. Yasyasti bhakti bhagavata kinchana gunasavata tasamasa tasaro. Arava bhakta shukto mahagunar manovite nasti davato bihi. This is the one who's engaged in the devotional service of the Lord properly, engaged. All the good qualities of the demigods, the suras, should automatically evolve. In other words, the qualities of the soul should awaken. Otherwise, we may impose what we understand as compassionate activity, but the process of devotional service is itself compassion. It's a compassionate movement because it's meant to reunite everyone with Krishna. It's an expansion of Radharani's compassion, literally speaking. So for a pure devotee, compassion means to satisfy Radharani, because Radharani is very sad to see that so many jivas who could be bringing pleasure to Krishna are not bringing pleasure to Krishna. So her compassion is for Krishna. How to increase Krishna's pleasure. So the devotees are always trying to satisfy Radharani. They're trying to please Srimati Radharani, no matter who they are, what they're doing. That's the principle. To try to reconnect us, ourselves, and other living entities with Krishna in a favorable way, so that Krishna is pleased. So if we remember, the goal of our life is ultimately to bring pleasure to Krishna. That itself can remind us of the importance of preaching Krishna consciousness, the importance of distributing transcendental books, the importance of distributing the holy name of Prasadam, and so on. How important it is. Not just for the people in general, but for our own purification, the awakening of our own compassion. When we engage in activities which are clearly compassionate, even from a material perspective, it has an effect. And we have you could say a mixed activity, like when we distribute prasadam. It's appreciated from the material platform, but we're doing it from the spiritual platform. So you get both effects there. It's a wonderful activity, prasad distribution. It's got both factors to it. People accept it as a materially compassionate act, but it's actually the highest form of spiritual compassion, because it's connecting people with Krishna. It's engaging them in devotional service. So to engage people in devotional service, and this will awaken their heart, because Krishna will see that you're engaging, you're trying to help others to become Krishna conscious. Therefore, he reciprocates. There's no one more dear in this world, Krishna says, the one who preaches his message of Bhagavad Gita, nor will there ever be one more dear. Krishna personally gives shelter to such a devotee. He personally is pleased with such, even if we're not realized, and pleased that we're assisting one who has compassion. Srila Prabhupada is a reservoir of compassion. So we can awaken by association with Prabhupada compassion. And the way of association is we're trying to assist him in whatever his guidelines he's giving us, chanting, hearing, remembering, preaching Krishna consciousness, opening temples, worshiping the deity, whatever it is, but assisting him in this way. So when we please a compassionate person, Krishna is very compassionate. He reciprocates compassionately on the servitor. That's by association of a compassionate, somebody who is compassionate, so we can awaken compassion within our hearts. When we associate with somebody who is compassionate, we try to keep that association with the instructions of the spiritual master, with devotional service. That's the same question. Anything else from the floor, or from the bed, or wherever you are, from the chair? Rohini, anything out there? Where are the Skypites?
No, we don't have any.
Quiet.
We have one question in French from Skype. Just a minute, I'm listening to it.
Okay.
It's Rasalila Mataji. She's sending her obeisances to you. So today we were talking about sadhana bhakti. It was described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Mm. Mm-hmm. So her question is, how was it before Srila Rupa Goswami wrote down his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where he's speaking about sadhana bhakti, but the devotees that are described in Srimad Bhagavatam, they certainly had some practice. So what was it? If was it the same sadhana bhakti or something else? We don't have any information about it.
We have some, very nice, we have some information obviously from Srimad Bhagavatam, where we see the practices of some of the great devotees therein, really, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, whoever it may be, they had certain practices for sure, no doubt about that. From maybe in most, generally speaking, one receives one sadhana from the spiritual master at initiation. In different lines of spiritual lines, parampara, they may have some differences, like in the Sri Sampradaya, they have sadhana bhakti very strictly practiced. Sadhana means it's not necessarily a activity, it's practices, various practices to evoke, in the case of devotional service, to evoke our remembrance of Krishna. So they have their sadhana, very strict rules and regulations in the performance of deity worship, certain mantras which they chant every day, etc., etc. In the Madhava Sampradaya, they have their sadhana, and in the market, they all have their various sadhanas, and slightly different maybe than other sampradayas. They also may vary in the course of history because during the yugas, things change. As we know from scripture, different practices, for instance, are emphasized in different yugas. In the Satya Yuga, meditation is the sadhana, is recommended, but the details, the type of meditation will vary again from circumstances, from spiritual master to another. But in those days, there was no need to have written forms because people had memories to remember and executed according to what they heard from their spiritual authorities. There wasn't the Vedas and the literatures of this day and age that we're in, are primarily for the Kali Yuga, primarily, because people's memories are so short. So, but the principle is the same. They receive their sadhana from their spiritual, like Narada, like Prahlad Maharaj received, in a sense, he received his sadhana from Narada Muni in the womb. Dhruva Maharaj also received his sadhana from Narada Muni. So they received their sadhana from a representative of Krishna, generally speaking, and after their initiation, whatever form that takes, then they start to practice. And it will vary. It will vary according to the age, according to the circumstances, and according to the eligibility of the candidate. But Rupa Goswami, prior to that, at least in this Kali Yuga, these sadhanas in this age of Kali Yuga were there in the different sampradayas. But Rupa Goswami, of course, on the request of Lord Chaitanya, is very special because he's empowered by Lord Chaitanya to present the sadhana bhakti, which can lead to Krishna prema, which is extremely rare. It wasn't even on the highest level, that is, at least of Madhurya Ras. That wasn't there before. It was never, it was there, but it was not revealed. Madhavendra Puri manifested it to the world shortly before Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime or his appearance in this world. But prior to that, it was never manifested. Sadhana was always regulation, rules and regulations, but not with the intention of coming to, maybe in most cases, not even to the stage of Raganuga Bhakti. what to speak of Rupa Nuga Bhakti, what to speak of Madhurya Ras. So the sadhana which Rupa Goswami has given is eligible by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya to bring one to a higher level, not just so in this age. What is the sadhana? As Lord Chaitanya just said, of all the regulated principles, chanting of the holy name is the most important of all. Everything else is the support to bring us to that platform of pure chanting of the holy name. So before that, chanting was going on, but it wasn't with that, let's say, that opportunity to awaken Madhurya Ras, or the highest level of devotional service, was going on. All the various sampradayas chant the names of the Lord in various mantras, etc. But Lord Chaitanya emphasized this as the only way in this Kali Yuga of actually attaining perfection in life. And the Goswamis have philosophically presented in such a way to make this very clear and to give various, so many different guidelines so that we can come to this pure platform of devotional service. Whereas previously the level of achievement was of another nature in some ways, Vaikuntha, or simply liberation into Brahman, or Ayodhya, whatever it may be. Maybe some Madhurya, Vatsalya Bhav or Dasya Bhav, but the mood of Sakya Bhav and Madhurya Bhav was very rare, very, very rare, not revealed. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers have revealed this to the world and given the means to realize it through that sadhana. And in other times, other yugas may be also there, but the practice with different people live a longer life. The modes of nature were differently, imposing differently on people. In such a yuga, the mode of goodness was prominent. So in different ages, there will be different methods. You don't need to teach somebody to follow regulated principles. They never even heard of them. They never heard of meat eating. So it wouldn't be a part of their liturgy if they'd never even heard of it. It doesn't exist in such a yuga, meat eating. So intoxication. These are subject matters which are prominent in Kali Yuga more than any other time. A little bit there in Treta Yuga, but more in Dwapara, but fully manifest in Kali. So the sadhana in Kali has to take into account a very different environment which we're living, a different conditioning which the living entities are in, a sadhana which is appropriate to the particular circumstance. So this is the Gaudiya Sampradaya instructions given by Rupa Goswami to become perfect in bhakti in this age of Kali, if we want to follow them, nectar of devotion, nectar of instruction, and so on. How to know the proper threshold between helping others advance in Krishna consciousness, one's own advancement, back and forth a little bit, isn't it? Sometimes we get too much absorbed in our own sadhana, we forget to put it into practical application by preaching, and sometimes we become so absorbed in preaching we forget to, practically speaking, fuel or charge our own batteries, and we become maybe a little bit irritated, or we lose it, or we become disheartened or something, affected by the results, whatever. So how to get that balance? Well, what's that smell? Terrible smell here. Paint, isn't it? Something I have to tolerate. So how to get that balance? Well, Prabhupada gave us a balance. It's hard when you're living at home. And we had a very nice balance. Prabhupada one time called it the ISKCON sandwich. We have a nice morning program, hearing and chanting, Mangalarti, Japa, Bhagavatam. And when you're a working man, it may not always be so easy, but as much as possible, we have a morning program and an evening program, hearing and chanting again in the evening. And during the day, as much as possible also, we try to remember our relationship with Krishna, Guru and Sadhu and Krishna, etc. Keeping a book with us, reading whenever we can, chanting whenever we can, like that. So we do need to, put the petrol in the tank, or the essence in the tank of our car, of our vehicles, as subtle and gross bodies. We have to be careful there that we don't go overboard, over endeavoring, and become weakened, or be another sign that we become irritated. We're not in a self-controlled state. Preaching isn't just about passion; it's compassion. But we have to also see that, we're not becoming kind of like, angered and, all disturbed when things don't go right and so on and so forth. Usually an indication that we're not yet so balanced in our sadhana with our preaching. Both have to be there to generally nurture the creeper of devotional service and to be effective. Both have to be there usually. I mean, maybe some exceptions when the spiritual master asks the devotee to do one or the other more than the other, so to speak. But in general, he's giving us that balance. And I think one of the main things is we don't. I mean, if you listen to Vaisheshika, for instance, the foundation of successful preaching is our sadhana, strong sadhana. It means hearing, regularly hearing Srila Prabhupada, reading his books, hearing his books, and chanting, at least those who are initiated, at least 16 rounds as attentively as we can every day. There are many different people going all night talking about details of sadhana, but the general things are there. We should try to apply them in our lives every day if we can. 5 most important items of devotional service, chanting the holy names, some kind of puja, some kind of, like that, different things, reading, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, making our home like a tirtha, trying to, remember before we go. It's like going to battle or something. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be fit if you're going to battle. You can't, you've got to be ready for it, rested, or sometimes it's hard when the war's on, but in general, it's like that. Going to play a sports event, you've got to be ready. You've got to be fit. So we have to be fit. So the sadhana bhakti is to give us that strength and also the right consciousness in which to present Krishna consciousness to others. So we're not overly, irritated or whatever it may be, like we do become sometimes when we try to preach, or we're not feeling, angry or whatever. There's a room for everything, but in general, or, fed up with this or something. We need both. We need both. Prabhupada gave us both. How to do that, that's up to the individual who can ask, discuss it amongst ourselves with your mentors or whatever it may be, to try to fine-tune a little bit better the balance there. But both must be there. As Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described, I think it was, who was it? Vetachar or Haridas, you are the topmost devotee because not only you practice devotional service, but you also nicely preach devotional service. Both, they stay there. They're hand in hand. They have to go together. Okay. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you. Looks like it, Rohini. Looks like it. If we have kirtan, will the neighbors upstairs complain?
Which, whose neighbor?
Above Yoga
You
Lyric.
don't have some?
Yoga Lyric, the neighbors in Yoga Lyric.
Well, we don't have anyone in Yoga Lyric right now.
No neighbors. They've moved
But
out.
I think they will spot us that we're not supposed to be here at Yoga Lyric. It's supposed to be closed, so they will hear that we're doing a kirtan.
Are you there?
No, I'm home.
There's nobody there, is there?
No, there's nobody there.
Good. So, okay, well, Krishna's here. Let us chant the holy name of
Yes,
Krishna.
Krishna.
And have a good day tomorrow. It's Kotishodas Babaji Tirobhav tomorrow. So try to remember
Thank
him.
you, Maharaj.
Babaji, but he was always chanting. That was his sadhana, to always chant. We're not ready for that yet. We have other things to do. We always try to chant. We'll definitely catch up on our sleep. We may not catch up on our chanting, though. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Go Premanande. Don't forget 2 million Bhagavad Gitas before the end of the year. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's campaign, Gita campaign, ki jai. Haribol. Hare Krishna, everybody. Haribol.
Haribol!
Haribol.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Jai Ho, Jai Ho, Jai Ho.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you all very much.
Jai.
Near and far. Quite a few French devotees tonight because this program particularly is for our preaching center in Paris. So most of the devotees are not all of you from different parts of the world. I wish you all the best and keep safe and keep chanting. And try to just as many books as you can, please. Thank you. Hare Krishna, goes to
Hare
Prabhupada.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Auckland ki jai.
Jai.
Australia,
Hare
America, Europe, in England, Scotland, France, everywhere. India, wherever you are. Hare Krishna, Germany. Longley, Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.